Okay, so here's what happened tonight. We watched Dear Evan Hansen. Um, it was the first night of the new actors in the show, Ann Sanders and Evan Hernandez, and the cast did their bows. The show ended as usual. I proceeded outside. I was sitting in the box as I usually do. I went down the stairs that are right by the exit and exited outside and went to the barriers to wait along with other fans who wanted to welcome the new actors. I think we were standing there maybe, I don't know, no more than 2 minutes, I don't think. And I heard a loud roar from down the street closer to Times Square. So the theater's about a half a block from Times Square. And I heard a loud roar of like a crowd. And my initial thought, because there are a lot of theaters there and it's stage doors when actors come out of who have just performed in a show that people like, a lot of times the crowd will erupt in a little roar of excitement to see them outside. So that was my very initial thought, but then immediately I thought that's too loud. I mean, I don't know who would elicit that loud of a roar from the crowd, however they performed. And so I thought, is there a rock event going on? Is there some sort of rock star in Times Square tonight? So that was my next thought. But very quickly, it became apparent within like 2 seconds that it wasn't a roar of celebration. It was a roar of fear and alarm. And no sooner had that occurred to me than we saw just hordes of people running towards us west on 45th Street, away from Times Square towards 8th Avenue. And they were screaming and crying. It was very much like a movie or a television show. People were parents were pulling their children, mostly teenagers, I think, by the arms, some smaller children, and just running towards us. And some continued past us towards 8th Avenue, but most seemed to just pour into the theater that we had just exited, all screaming and crying. And so at this point, I think obviously something is wrong. And of course, I had just come from Dayton on Sunday morning. I flew out about, I don't know, 5 hours after the gunman that shot up Ned Pepper's, where we all used to go to hang out when I lived there. So I had the surreal thought that, oh wow, this is that, or is this that? Maybe I thought I think I was still in this surreal state, so I thought, what the hell? But anyway, everybody was pouring in from Times Square into the Dear Evan Hansen Theater, as well as the Ain't Too Proud Theater next door. And I think a lot of us who were standing outside just followed them because it just seemed like the thing to do. So we followed them, and I followed people back up the stairs to the box seat where I was sitting. And just as I reached the top, I thought, oh, this is the stupidest thing. If there's a mass shooter chasing this crowd and follows them in here, we're literally trapped. There's nowhere we can go. I think there's a ladder that goes up to, I don't know, somewhere the overhang or whatever. But obviously, a crowd's not going to be able to all climb up a ladder to flee a mass shooter, even if we could get up there. There's no other way to go out besides the way we came up. And so, as I had that thought, I turned around and started to head back down. And a lady said to me, "No, go, go," wanting me to return back up. I think she felt I was impeding her progress, but I think she came in off the street, so she didn't realize that there wasn't really anywhere to go. At least to my knowledge, I can't think, but I don't think there's another way to exit that box. I think maybe you could climb over to the mezzanine. I'm not sure. I don't think, there's an actual other exit. So I just said no. I was trying to impart that it was a bad idea, but it was so chaotic and I couldn't think words. And so I'm just trying to say no and go back down the stairs. And I did go back down the stairs. And I got outside. And I didn't really know what to do at that point because people are still running and screaming. But it also occurred to me that my friend who was going to meet me, I thought, to go to the Brooklyn Diner, she also had just gotten out of show, and I thought her show was possibly shorter than mine. It was on 47th Street. So I realized that she could potentially have been walking through Times Square to come meet me. And that, I think, was the first moment of actual panic. I think before that it was all just too surreal, and I just didn't really grasp what was happening, even though I was analytically thinking, oh, is this a mass shooter? It was just all too weird and unreal. And so the moment I thought, oh, is my friend coming right now through Times Square? Then I sort of thought, oh, shit, this is a real thing that could be happening. But I never heard anything. I didn't hear a motorcycle backfire. I didn't hear any shots. I didn't hear anything of that nature. I just saw the crowd of people running and screaming and crying. And I think for all of us who hadn't been in Times Square, our assumption was that those people had seen something go down because of the way that they were acting. Just terrified for their lives. So I actually kind of went over towards the stage door and then past that and went over, I can't even remember, I think I went into Ain't Too Proud's theater briefly to see if anyone there knew what was going on, because people were filing in there too. And people were just saying, shooter, shooter, but we don't know. So it started to become like some people maybe were just running because other people were running, and which definitely would have described all of us who had been at the theaters, because we had no idea and we hadn't seen anything other than the people running. So bearing in mind that my friend might be in Times Square, I started to kind of walk back that way before thinking, oh, if this is real, that would be a bad idea. I mean, what am I going to do, obviously? So I kind of stopped in front of this Dear Evan Hansen stage door, and the gentleman who was manning that kind of yelled at me to clear the door or whatever, as if I'm locking the door myself, one person. But I moved aside, and I'm not sure if he was doing that just because I asked him if he knew what was happening, and he said he didn't. I don't know if that means he didn't know exactly what had happened, but he knew it was safe now, or he just still didn't know what was happening. But he was very insistent about clearing the door, so I almost thought he just was also in kind of a surreal mode and just was sticking to like protocol for something to do because he didn't really know what to do. So yeah, obviously I moved aside from the door. Well, I'm thinking, what do I do in terms of like trying to find my friend? I'm trying to text her, but it's still pretty chaotic. People are running around and crying and looking for their children. A lot of parents who were at Dear Evan Hansen with their kids got separated. It seemed like in the running out, some people had run out and down to 8th Avenue, and others had run it back into the theater. So it was because I think the parents stayed back while the teenagers were at the stage door, so they weren't quite together. So everybody just started taking off into different directions, and I think got separated because I saw one lady and she came back from 8th Avenue saying that she was looking for her kids, pretty terrified. So I think I just decided to, I wasn't having any luck texting. As far as like typing intelligible letters or whatever. So I just ended up running to 8th Avenue and going over to 44th and down into the subway so I could kind of regroup and text my friend and outside of the chaos that was on 45th at that time, and try to find out. And it was a couple minutes later that she texted me back that they were okay, that some people had run towards them as they were walking away from their show and saying that something was happening. But so my friend and the friend that she was with were fine. And then she texted me that they had actually talked to a police officer a minute later and found out that it was a motorcycle backfiring. So it was fine in terms of there was no attack, obviously. So I went back towards the music box, I guess just to see if all the parents and kids had gotten reunited and if everybody was okay, because in terms of when everybody was running into the theater, it was just madly chaotic, and I kind of wondered if anyone got hurt or if everybody was okay. I don't know, I just felt like I probably wanted something to do. I didn't know what to do, so I felt like I just needed to check on them, even though I didn't know anyone in there other than I had talked to a couple of kids at the stage door in like the minute before all this happened. There was a young girl that had come out who wanted to get autographs, and I pointed out a spot to her so she could be right at the front for what we thought was going to be, meeting the new actors. So I don't know. So I went back to the music box. I could see some of the actors were leaving. They looked pretty shaken. Obviously, you have a bunch of people run into your workplace screaming about a mass shooter. I think that would be pretty jarring. And I think I read on Twitter that they were held backstage and just, had to stay in their dressing rooms and wait it out. So that was probably pretty terrifying, not being able to see what was going on and, what was happening if anyone was hurt. As terrifying as it was for us. Outside, we could at least kind of see that after a few minutes that, there weren't any obviously injured or shot people. So to some extent that probably kept the panic at bay to some extent, although there was certainly panic in those first few minutes. It started to settle down after a few minutes. So I went back to the music box, and there were ambulances. At least some had gone by, but one had stopped at the music box, and there was a woman who had been watching the show who had a leg injury. I'm not sure if she just fell trying to flee back inside or running up the stairs, or if she got stepped on, or I don't know what happened, but she was taken out in a wheelchair with her leg wrapped. There was a pregnant woman who was sitting on a folding chair that they had placed in the lobby for her. And she seemed very overcome by the events, and I don't think she was injured in any way. And when she came out, I asked her if she was okay, and she said yes. I think it was a lot of stress, and she just had to sit for a moment or something. But I think maybe the paramedics looked at her before she left too, because she came out right ahead of them. I didn't see any other injuries, but I wasn't there for 5 minutes while I went to the subway, so I don't know if anyone else was taken away with an injury. And I think that's pretty much what happened. I left there and just kind of trying to process I think all the parents looking for their kids, and the kids just being terrified after they'd had this experience that they looked forward to for so long. In yet another place that should be safe, a theater. So, I don't know, I'm just processing. I'm just thinking, obviously we're really lucky that was a false alarm. I could only imagine what happened is, maybe a few people thought that there was the sound of the motorcycle backfiring was gunshots and took off running and screaming, and that just made a domino effect, because that's what happened to us at the theater when we saw by then what was a big crowd of people running and screaming and screaming for us to run, and screaming about a shooter. We assumed that they had seen something that they were fleeing from. So I think probably they had assumed the same thing from the people that they saw running and screaming. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So I don't know. If something like that had happened, I think it would be much like Dayton in that there are so many police around there. I can't imagine that it could go on for long, but it doesn't have to. It went on for less than a minute in Dayton. And 9 people were killed and 20-something were injured. And their lives changed, obviously. And everybody who was traumatized as well. So it doesn't take very long. But we're just lucky that, we live in a great state with gun laws that reflect a society that gives a shit about its people. So